The month of January has concluded, and I decided that for this month, at least, I was going to do a recap of the books that I read this month. I decided not to set any goals or expectations for myself for any month because I just don't want to deal with that pressure. So this month, I read 4 books, which you would think, sounds fairly reasonable because that's about a book a week and a half. But I read weird. The first book that I read, I finished in 2 days. The second book took me 2 weeks. The third book took me over a week. And the fourth book took me again only 2 days. So I'm very weird with reading. It is not a guarantee that I read every day. And I really debated on how I wanted to go about my recap for this month on what I read. Did I want to give a summary with no spoilers? Did I want to do a summary with spoilers? What did I want to do? And I decided, I'm probably not going to do any kind of summaries, and I'm just going to tell you how the experience went. So unintentionally, this month ended up being the month where I read Jae-jones. I don't know, that's just what happened. And I'm going to start with the book that I was the most excited to read. Wintersong. I heard that it was a sexy labyrinth retelling, and I was all about it. So this is where I started. And I was so disappointed that I was disappointed. So I'll start with the things that I really liked about this book. In direct contrast to my experience with Brandon Sanderson, the writing style of this book is so much closer to what I really enjoy reading and what I really connect with. It had that very flowery language, lots of metaphor, just came across as like more poetic prose. And that is the kind of writing that I really like. I enjoyed the sexier moments, and the themes that this book explores are fantastic. The themes of identity, embracing your monstrous side, love, sacrifice, and family. But to get into the dislikes, I had to wonder, was this the best way to explore those themes? The stupid metaphor that I came up with was this book is like this beautiful steed pulling a fairy tale carriage. Someone magnificent has to be behind those gilded doors. Oh, it's a piece of cheese. Disappointing, bizarre, though still delicious, it is a piece of cheese after all. A very convoluted way to say it was a lot of words for very little said. And that was, I think, an issue of pacing for me with this book. I really wondered why we paused and focused on certain aspects and dragged those moments out, and then felt like we just sped run through other moments. The other thing that I want to mention before we move on, Hans, we have this moment with Hans where it's set up to be this kind of complicated relationship. Hans and the main character, Liesel, were like almost childhood sweethearts in a way, and then he ends up getting engaged to her older sister? Younger sister? Her sister. So it kind of sets up this tension, and then there's a moment where Liesel lives out this alternative reality where her sister never existed, and so she and Hans kind of act upon the feelings that they had when they were children because he's not engaged anymore. And then they have this kind of baffling argument, and then we never hear from Hans again. He just vanishes from the story, and so I was like, why does this character exist again? I'm confused. The other thing that unfortunately I ended up not liking about this book was the romance. Apparently I'm really critical of romances, so if you're interested in that, subscribe. You can tell that the characters obviously really care for each other, and there's blatant attraction, but then they've confessed that they love each other, and after that, they start to get to know each other a bit more. I wasn't a big fan of it. The other thing that I find really fascinating about this book is how sex is explored. because sex in this book literally starts to kill Liesel. Her senses start to go away, like every time that they reach the epitome of passion. And I think it's a really fascinating approach to sex. Do I think it's healthy? Not at all, but do I find it fascinating? Yeah, I did. The other thing that I want to note about this book in particular is the main character Liesel is written to have bipolar disorder, which I feel like had I known that, like picked up on it earlier in the story, I feel like a lot of things would have made a lot more sense to me as the story went on. However, it didn't feel clear enough to me that that is how Liesel is being portrayed. And I get it, it's a historical novel, so you're not going to have the diagnostic labels that we have now. So obviously, you can't come out and just be like, I'm Liesel and I have bipolar disorder. Like, no, that term didn't exist back then. But I do wish that that aspect of her character had been made more obvious. However, this is part of a duology. There's another book, Shadowsong. And so I was like, you know what? I'm excited for this book because maybe we'll dive into Liesel, Elizabeth, and the Goblin King's romance a bit more. So the things I liked about this book. I liked the writing style. Oh, the other thing, real quick, to talk about the writing style, as much as I like this kind of writing style more, interestingly enough, the way that this book was crafted, Liesel comes across as like exceedingly pompous, and I didn't really care for that much. Anyway, back to Shadowsong, the second book in the duology. Again, I like the writing style. It does still come across as a little bit pompous, but that's okay. And then again, the themes of sacrifice, identity, embracing your monstrous side, and love are all really fascinating. But I have to ask myself again, was this the best way to convey those themes? The metaphors and imagery, like I was saying about the writing style being pompous, the metaphors and imagery can feel a bit too heavy-handed at times. And then the pacing, yet again, just didn't land for me. Lots of words for what feels like very little actually happening. The other thing that was so disappointing about this book, because the reason I was looking forward to this one was to explore Liesel and the Goblin King's romance a bit more. They rarely interact in this book. It is far more about Liesel and her brother, which again is fine, but for me, expecting to explore their romance a bit more and to not have it at all was just kind of like, oh, that's unfortunate. Okay. And really the big thing that I feel about this duology is either Wintersong needed to be a standalone or Shadowsong needed to be the only book. But as a sequel, Shadowsong just feels a bit redundant to me. So here are my concluding thoughts about this particular duology. I liked this book a bit more because of the sexier moments, but it has a much lower rating than I thought it would. And then this book has an even lower rating because it wasn't that great for me. That said, because my expectations were so off with Wintersong specifically, I might reread it again. Coming into it with the knowledge that it is far more a gothic coming of age than it is a sexy labyrinth retelling, I might actually enjoy this book a bit more. Maybe I'll reread Shadowsong one day, but I'm not gonna hold myself to that. But again, if I were to reread these again with realistic expectations, I might find that I enjoy them a bit more. So, being disappointed in these books, I'm honestly really surprised that I moved on to more jae-jones books. But the whole reason that I picked up another jae-jones book that I own is because I was really curious if the writing had changed, and if it had, in what way. So I picked up Guardians of Dawn, Zhara, started reading, and didn't stop. The writing style is like 100% the kind that I just love to devour and enjoy. To me, it is very much an improvement from the wintersong, shadowsong duology. The romance in this is a really cute, innocent, albeit cheesy romance. The fantasy elements in this book, fantastic, and also I really appreciated the little Cinderella retelling bits. Like, she literally loses a slipper at a ball festival, and it's kind of the clue that she's gone missing. And I really appreciated that. The thing that I will say about this book overall is it is pretty cliche and stereotypical in the genre of fantasy novel with a teen hero. The teen is a reluctant chosen one who has unbelievable powers that they're just kind of like, whoa, what the heck do I do with this? And reluctantly become the hero of the story. In terms of plot, there's really not much new happening. It doesn't subvert this particular brand of the genre, but I did find myself enjoying this book so much more than the duology. There were some things that I did dislike though. It is cheesy. It's a cheesy novel. I don't mind cheese, obviously, the really bad metaphor from earlier. And I don't mind cheesy things in books. I think cheesiness is fine, but I can see how it can be a drawback. The cheesy things that I didn't really connect with was reference to jae-jones duology is in this book, which it was probably pretty fun for people who had read Wintersong, who then go on to read this, to be like, oh my gosh, like that's a fun little Easter egg. But for me, because I went immediately from reading the duology to reading this, I was just like, okay, I guess. Had there been more time between them, I might not have been bothered by it as much. The other thing that, again, I didn't really connect with personally was the Bangtan brothers. Very clear allusion to BTS Bangtan Sonyeondan. Listen, I was a K-pop girly throughout all of college and a little bit afterwards, so I get it. J-Hope was my bias. I loved that man. And I get it. From what I understand, BTS has a lot of meaning to the author. I don't want to sit here and judge an author's right to give thanks to people that have made an impact in their life. Authors are going to do that. However, I still found it cheesy. Also, the end battle of this book feels a bit anticlimactic. Spoiler alert, I forgot that the demon had been slain. I kind of didn't pick up on that or something, I guess. And I was like, well, I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's part of a series. So it makes sense that it would be anticlimactic in a way to have it lead to an end series big climactic battle. Yeah, obviously it was a bit anticlimactic. I'm really glad that I actually went on to read more jae-jones because I really enjoyed myself. I would definitely rate this much higher than the duology before. And because I enjoyed this book so much, you know I had to jump into the next one. So my review of this book is going to seem contradictory because my dislikes outnumber to the things that I liked about the book, and yet I like this book more than the first one, which apparently is sort of uncommon from some of the other reviews that I read, but that's okay. I guess I'm odd in that way. So I'm going obviously mentioning the writing style, but I feel like at this point it's established. I like the writing style. I thought the big bad in this book was far more interesting and memorable than the first one. Far more compelling. I was into the twist reveal far more than the first book. Also, just with this series overall, I love the diversity of this. The diversity in size, shape, and color of the people, their abilities, their disabilities, the gender identities, the sexual orientations. I love just how diverse this series is. I think it's an absolute delight. And then, specific to this book, I love Ami and Gaiden / the Beast. I love that their powers, their magic powers, are complements of one another. I think that that's so cool. I like the fact that they literally infuse their magic with one another's souls to beat the bad guy, because in a way their powers are almost the same. They're like just different flavors of one another. I was into it, bro. The things that I didn't like about this book, for all intents and purposes, this book, it doesn't. But the immediate thought that I had with the reanimated dead, or the undead, was zombies. I was like, oh, this is a zombie book. I wasn't expecting that. And I'm not like anti-zombie, but I'm really not that much into zombies or the undead in that sort of capacity. There was so much more body horror and gore in this book than I was expecting, and I am not a body horror gore girly at all, so that was a bit rough. Also, I found the Bangtan brothers in the first book a bit cheesy, so when I saw that they were going to have a bigger role in this book and possibly in the rest of the series, I was just kind of like, oh, not a big fan of it. I don't despise it either. It's kind of like, oh, not that into it. The middle of this book drags. It feels like it would have done better serialized, because it had this serialized pattern of, we're going to travel to this new area, we're going to fight a horde of the undead, we're going to flee the area to a new area, and then we're going to fight a horde of undead, and then we're going to flee to a new area, and rinse and repeat. And I think I had about 200 pages, probably a little less than 200 pages left. And I was like, how can there be that much more story to this? What more can happen? It did pick up once we got past the travel bits and we were in the cave system of the mountain, and then, went back to the pillar. If you read the book, it'll make more sense. It did pick up for me at that point. And like I said, the number of things that I didn't like about this book would make you think that this book is rated lower than the first book, but it's actually higher. And the whole reason for that is just Ami and Gabe. I adore them, individually on their own as characters, but then I also really enjoy their romance together. Again, I think they're more compelling of characters. They're more fascinating to me. Ami is pretty clearly autistic coded, but again, those two characters carried this thing for me. And I think a lot of people appreciate Zhara and Han and Yuli being there, as well as the Bangtan brothers, to provide kind of that levity that is very much needed, because Ami and Gaiden are both kind of darker characters, but I don't know, maybe I just like darker characters. I don't know what to tell you. So this month was a S.J.-Jones month, unintentionally. I did not set out to read every S.J.-Jones book that's available in the month of January, but here we are. I have no idea if I'm going to do monthly recaps. Who knows? We'll see. This is a go with the flow kind of channel, but that's what I read this month. I'd say overall a pretty good reading month. A little bit disappointing, but we ended on a high note. And I would much rather it go in that direction than the other way. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye! I don't know how well the audio went because it's attached to my shirt instead of holding it. Wow, that was bad. That was so bad. This is a horrible beginning. I'm probably gonna... So I don't want to, sit on it. Sit on it? Excuse me.